You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Adam Snowball.
Hey, how you doing?
Adam, tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
I am about 6 feet tall. No, I'm sort of my day job. I do shipping and receiving. I've bounced around a bit. I do a bit of contracting. I've been a server. I've been a bartender. Worked in a deli for a while. But sort of my passion, the thing I get spend all my time on is this podcast and D&D. Really, D&D in general.
So, from doing bartending, doing shipping and receiving, just doing a multitude of jobs, where did D&D come across into the outlet here? Because
D and
I've talked to some people that do D&D podcasts,
yeah,
and for me, the farthest I've ever tried to dive into the realm of D&D was the fact of I had a D&D poster when I was a kid,
right
and
on.
I just liked the monsters on it.
Yeah, that's how it gets you, man. It's it's something I did as a kid, to be honest. My brothers and I, we got a book from our uncle. He kind of explained how it worked. It was something fun to do. We lived in the country, so not a lot going on. No movie theaters, like 3 channels, that kind of thing. So when you find something to pass the time, and it was a lot of fun. It was a way to spend time with my brothers where nobody was punching anybody, and or at least we were talking about punching each other, but you didn't feel it, so that was nice.
Now, how old is D&D exactly?
I think that I don't know all of the history of it, but I know it was made in the 70s. I think the late 70s by this guy named Gary Gygax. He and his friends got together in a garage and put together a bunch of rules. They were trying to make a game that was kind of more like Warhammer is. They were trying to figure out like a war game and build a bunch of rules for it. But so many years later now, it's more about story. At least the way we play it, it's less about the rules and more about going through a journey with a bunch of people and
Yeah,
getting somewhere at the end of it.
kind of like crafting out your own tale. I know there's always a what they call like a what is it, dungeon master who kind of
Yep.
controls and runs the whole entire show. He's seen as like the narrator of it, and then you got a bunch of characters that are playing inside of it, developing a story. It's what you see in Stranger Things too, and they're all playing on sitting down in the basement a board game. Now, I think what's interesting about that is the type of group activity it is. It's much like a game of Monopoly, but more advanced.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I don't want to relate, slicing up goblins and stabbing orcs and dragons and doing all these wonderful things you can do in Dungeons and Dragons to Monopoly and making your
Well, I
parents
mean,
broke. But hey,
it's the same thing. I mean, it's just a bunch of people sitting around a table. Just the way we do it, we try and get a story built in there and see if you can satisfy some of the urges you have in your day that maybe Monopoly doesn't fill.
yeah, I definitely think it's a sense of release too, because what I find is very interesting. It's also an educational game as well. I mean, it teaches you so much about folklore, myths, legends, and types of monsters that you see. I mean, it's just like playing like or watching Game of fucking Thrones. Like I haven't seen Game of Thrones, and
Hmm.
I'm glad to say that, but I know people that have.
Yeah,
And
fair.
it's like they want to sit there and talk about, oh, you're playing a game with orcs and goblins. It's like, yeah, but you're watching a show with dragons.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that different. The only difference is you actually get to do it, which makes it feel, like I said, way more satisfying. You get like, at least the way we've been playing together, this group for like 5 years, and we spent for a while there every weekend. We'd hang out together, telling the same story. You get so emotionally invested in this story. I say it's like watching Friends or whatever your show of choice is, except you're in the show, and
Pivot.
you get to do it.
Pivot. I said pivot. I just watched that episode this morning. I'm like,
Yeah, I've gone back into it. Stands up, man. It stands the test of time.
can't mess with Jennifer Aniston, dude. Oh my
No.
God, she really holds up. You want to talk about D&D holding up? She holds up.
Just don't watch an episode and then look up a picture of her now. They'll just make you sad. It's been
Nah,
a long
dude,
time.
I'm telling you, she looks like basically the same. Like you could tell she's aged, but she still holds up. It's like Halle
Well,
Berry. You don't know where.
yeah, she does all those Aveeno commercials, right? She's got the products to keep her young.
Silky smooth, baby, silky smooth.
Yeah.
Now, so with Dungeons and Dragons, now how do
Hmm.
you start a character? Because obviously, with RPG type games, I know a bunch of friends that I'll be like, "Hey, man, it's my one day off. Do you want to hang out? Maybe do a podcast?" Can't, bro. It's D&D night. I'm like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah,
What
and
do
that means
you?
you're going to be gone for 4 or 5 hours. It's
They
like,
don't answer their phone all day.
no, it's serious.
I'm the only one that has not gotten sucked into this. They're all like, I'm like, guys, can somebody, somebody, hey, your dog is outside of the house. I need the key to get back in. He's just not answering. It's like, okay.
No, you go on airplane mode or something. At least we do, but that's because we're recording, right? But it's just one of those things. You take it seriously when you're there. I totally get not wanting to get invested in it because it is a huge amount of your time. For a while there, I was playing 2 or 3 games every week. It's like 2 or 3 nights a week for 4 or 5 hours. Sometimes you're sitting there with a group of people, and it's so, like I said, it's so rewarding in a lot of ways. But that's like a part-time job, and you're not getting paid for it. You're just hanging out.
Now, how did you guys decide to turn this into a podcast, just going from the average board game? Did you just figure out that your conversations and the type of stuff you guys were doing were just so much fun, you wanted to expand to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of hope other people get a kick out of it the way we do. There are a lot of D&D podcasts specifically that have gotten a little bigger recently, especially. So we thought, hey, if we're going to do it, now's the time. If we're going to be playing together for the next 20 years or whatever, I mean, or the next 3 until somebody has a kid and then it all falls apart. But we wanted to like try and figure out if that's something we wanted to do. I'm the DM in our group, so for me, it was more about trying to tell a good story that hopefully people will enjoy. The joy I get out of the game is sitting around a table with my friends and giving them an experience that they can get invested in and then feel good about after.
And kind of knowing your friends a little bit too makes it easier to craft out a story because you can find what either pisses them off or also what makes them interested in getting into it.
Yeah, 100%. And I know if somebody's got a rough week, if somebody had a great week, like I know what kind of story to tell them to help that out a little bit, or push their buttons if that's what they need.
Now, do you try and play a character as well? Because I know with a lot of D&D podcasts, not involving yourself in the story, but more like you guys act out your character that you create as well, as such as disguising a voice and such as
Oh yeah.
um, maybe sitting in a certain attire. I know that saying that sounds a little bit nerdy, but it's actually really not. It makes it very interesting. I know how many times on either in my everyday life I've tried to narrate my life as Christopher Walken. Too many
Hey, there
fucking
you go.
times to count.
Yeah,
Um,
I've heard you mention Morgan Freeman before too. I mean, he's just
yeah.
got that silky smooth voice.
Ever since I was a little boy, people have enjoyed.
You're taking me away.
Exactly. Take me down to dreamy, dreamy land. Well,
Yeah.
I find it really interesting because I've been throughout my life, the one video games I really found that kept my attention were RPG style games, mostly on the type of
Hmm.
kind of creative history added to it. I mean, you bet your ass I owned the Game of Year edition of Skyrim when it came out.
Yeah, and that's talk about amounts of time spent. That one is like minimum 40 to 50 hours you spend on that game, and that's if you just book through it.
And one of
Like,
my first games, besides playing like Viva Pinata or something childish like that, was
hmm.
playing Oblivion. I mean, the it got me interested in wanting to look up the Salem witch trials. First of all, the amount of witchcraft and sorcery types of things that they included into the game made me want to research it in my actual life to see what the history of where we have been and what how far we have gone from there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, where these people get their inspirations from, there's so much history, so much mythology, like you mentioned. I know a good friend of mine, Ben Clifford, runs another D&D podcast in Ireland that's all about Irish mythology, called Homebrew Quest, and they like, or just Homebrew, and they kind of make it up as they go. That's what Homebrew means, but it also they drop in all of this Irish history that, I mean, you and I haven't heard of,
I
but to
I,
me, that's interesting, right?
That is, and I looked up actually, I used to do a spin-off of this podcast where we focused on specific topics, and my buddy's like, "I'm into folklore monster." I'm like, what do you mean folklore monster? Like Loch Ness monster?" He's like, "Nah, old school folklore." I'm like, "All right." And I looked up this thing called the Cluricon, I think it is, and it's
Yeah, I
supposed
think
to
that's an Irish thing.
that's an Irish thing. It's supposed to be the leprechaun's drunk cousin. I'm like, whoa, what? And I find out it's a D&D character while I'm recording the podcast, like reading off the information about this thing. I'm like, now how
Yeah.
actual stuff is in, is actually in folklore? And a lot of it is. I mean, I used to play a game back in the day. It was a board game called Heroescape,
Hmm.
and it seemed like that turned a lot into, or that was like a kind of another version of Dungeons and Dragons. You got these little monk figures on this set board. You get to move them around. They're not just monks, but they were all over, from Western, cowboys, robots, all this type of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
They were seen as nerdy, but the game setting up process of it, you had to set your lands down, create the battlefield, and so much stuff. And there wasn't a whole lot of structured listing going on with it. But
Well, yeah, fair.
do you find with your podcast you do more of a structured list or a type of kind of research in a way, setting it up like for game night?
Well, for me, it's easier because I tend to make up the world. Like as the DM, I bring in all of the information that the game. So D&D is like a brand name. It's like Kleenex. It's not not all RPGs are D&D, but D&D is the company, or Wizards of the Coast is the company. D&D is the game itself that they've released, and I use all the information that they give me. They've got rules, they've got monsters, they've got like tables for like if I want to decide something random, but I can't think of it myself, I can, random character name or like a random beer or a random whatever. And and I use all of that stuff to make the world I want to make because personally, I can't remember all the details of somebody else's world. If I'm sitting there at the table making it up as I go, because a lot of it is improvised. You have to have the confidence to know, oh, who's somebody's cousin? I don't know. I make that up on the fly. I write it down. The next time somebody asks, well, I've got it written down so I can remember that
Yeah, you create a story, you gotta make sure you gotta refer back to it too, especially
for
being the
sure.
dungeon master. You're writing like, you stumble across a thing of elves and they decide to rob you of all your gold or whatever. You have to make sure that you've written that down in case it gets referenced later in history. Like he's
Yeah.
gotta retell a story to the townspeople of what to avoid on the trails. And next thing you know, you have that story in there. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm pretty sure that's
No, man, you've got it in a nutshell. And like that's part of the benefit of recording it. Even before we decided to make the podcast, we were recording our episodes so that partly so I could listen back and go, I just spun garbage and bullshit for the last 5 hours. I don't remember all of it. And here's a way for me to go back and skip through some sections to go, all right, I gave them 4 gems instead of 400 gems. That's going to be important. Or like I said this, I said that, and I can actually make sure I'm maintaining realism because I know it's all a fantasy game, but you want to go into that show, that story, and feel like it makes sense. Feel like it exists somewhere.
you can't have a cliff and then he'd be like, "Oh, I'm gonna have him jump all the way across to the other side." That's not. You can't do that
No,
because that
exactly.
just kills the
People
whole
go
point.
for sure. The realism goes out the window, and then people go, What just happened?" Like we're in this with you, we're on the same page, and all of a sudden you switch to a different book. Like what's going on here?
I want to see a D&D podcast where everyone gets high as hell and tries to do it. And imagine trying to play that and not have it recorded and then try and remember all the shit that you did. Like you stumble across a bag of Funyuns and then like it just starts going into food, like different layers of cakes. Next thing you know, you're
Well,
on Google.
my experiences are basically any time where a bunch of people get together and get high is basically a D&D adventure. It all seems like crazy and fun and random, but also I've played those kinds of D&D games and it goes off the rails so fast. You can't like guide people when everybody it's like a bag of cats. People just go their own way, thinking their own stuff, and you don't want to get in their space about it either.
Yeah,
Uh
you want them to enjoy it as well. But I think
exactly.
what's interesting about playing Dungeons and Dragons is like I said, the group activity aspect of it too. You mean just from knowing your friends and the types of people you podcast with? I mean, doing this, it's a form of relaxation. Do you ever take the type, I guess, methods to be able to craft out a more personal adventure for each of your members?
Oh, absolutely. Um, to me, Like you mentioned earlier, doing a voice or like dressing a certain way. We don't videotape it, so I can tell you we're all just sitting around in t-shirts and sweatpants and stuff because we're just in my buddy's living room. But we I do a lot of voices. I find that really makes the moment more real for people, and it makes them look at me and not see me.
You got to give me some voices, man. You can't just toss that out there.
Well, I mean, I do a bunch of them in the podcast, so you can feel free to check those out. Anybody listening, feel free to check those out. But
Well,
um,
give me
they're,
one of.
they're not necessarily like impressions,
Yeah,
right?
no, they're more like you use a disguise or an accent in it.
Yeah, so a lot of the way I do like one of the characters I play, because I play basically everybody who's not the main characters. There's a little guy who's a gnome, which is like a 2 foot tall dude who's basically useless at everything except he carries this book around and they ask him a lot of questions. His name's Camden. I basically just do like a slightly, I hope not racist, like Hispanic accent. So he basically sounds, "Hey man, like chill out, please leave those things alone. That's my book." Like that's the kind of stuff I do for him, and it makes
That's
him sound
awesome.
small and like pathetic, right? So
Yeah.
you want to protect him.
Well, he's got to sound feeble. All right, give me a
Yeah.
shopkeeper.
Oh, a shopkeeper could sound like anything. It could just be a man or a woman with a sort of soft accent as well. So,
Okay, well,
I mean, you can get.
I'm really about to play you now, bro. All right, here we go. Ready?
Oh,
Give me. I want a general shopkeeper. I want an average store clerk,
okay.
male.
I mean, sometimes I just go with my voice because that's easy. If you're playing a character who you don't care if the people remember, I usually just go for me. But give me some random that you want me to add in there, and I'll do my best.
I want a blacksmith, a big burly ass blacksmith.
Yeah, blacksmiths always have deeper voices. They're working with metal, a little tougher. Sometimes you go like just slightly English, just because English people sound like fantasy.
Or
If you have a
Scottish too.
Oh, Scottish is really good, but usually Scots are dwarves. They're like the little
Yeah,
wee dudes who are deep barrel chested. If you go to a barrel chested Scottish dwarf, you're gonna get a really nice set of armor.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
that sort of thing.
All right,
And it's more fun for me, right?
give me a guard, an average guard at like a not a very popular city, but a more like a small city.
Okay, guards are a lot like stormtroopers and stuff. If you're into Star Wars at all, they're usually these like throwaway dudes or women who are just so stupid and oblivious. So usually they're like, "Oh, hey, have you seen that guy over there? Oh, should he be here? Ah, whatever. He seems to be fine. Hey, man, did you check out that thing the other day at the market? Ah, so good. Fuck." Like I kind of slip towards California bro sometimes. I think.
He slipped into a stoner guard, like he found the
Yeah.
magic mushroom. See, I would
Well,
have been
he's.
like, "Stop, violator! Where is your sweet?"
Oh yeah, that's a good guard. That's like a guard who knows what he's doing. Most guards, especially say a small town guard, who's just going to be standing around. He's getting paid not enough money to stand there for 10 hours. He's like a security guard, right?
Yeah. So how do you pick? Yeah, he's Paul Blart of the Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you start off your character? Like, what class do you go for? Because you can get the much where I love my fascination for D&D is also the
Mhm.
arts that it goes behind with wizardry, being not just a mage but an archer, also dealing with knights. Like, what are you
Oh
trying to
yeah.
go for?
Well, so I don't get to play that much because I am usually the storyteller. It's a thing not a lot of people are comfortable doing because you do have to improv a lot. You do have to kind of mediate a lot, and you don't really get to play the game like everybody else plays the game. You are basically like, I am the N64, I am the computer. Everybody else gets to hold the controllers. But when I do make characters, I tend to make ones that are usually pretty smart or pretty like wise. Like I do play a lot of wizards and stuff because I like to kind of give the DM a hard time. I like to try and um, throw him a wrench every once in a while just to make sure he's still awake.
I definitely think for any game I've ever played, being a mystical wizard has always been my fascination. I know it sounds nerdy. I think it was just the objectivity of like the spell casting gives you a wide variety of things to do.
Oh
Even though
yeah,
hacking and slashing is a hell of a lot easier, but if you can be like a battle mage or someone that's able to cast spells, it really can get you out of any type of scenario.
yeah,
And
for sure.
it's funny when you start going into this, if you try and have a conversation like this with anybody that's not like a fan of RPG games or just medieval
Hmm.
games in general, they start to look at you like, "What are you, like a nerd?" I'm like, I will pull out my 12-sided die and slap you in the face with it. I mean, if you really
That'll
want,
do some damage, man.
but it's an enjoyable experience. I think when people that do play D&D and play Dungeons and Dragons or just do a podcast on it, it's the fact like it's the same thing as like going out to a bar or just having a group hang with your friends, you know. There's no difference in it, just maybe the actions that are told and the stories obviously that are told, but it's all about hanging out and having a connectivity with people that you want to build kind of relationships with and also keep them strong. I mean, it's a bonding experience when you sit down and play a 12-hour game together, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've been doing this, so it's become kind of a part of our lives. The friends we play D&D with are some of our best friends, and they talk about like we people have read or written papers on this stuff, that the bond that you form when you're playing a game like this with people every week or every other week or whatever is basically the same kind of bond that you form in war. It's not obviously the same thing. We're not in real danger,
But it's a
but
caring aspect to it.
yeah, and the high pressure the situations you get put in, if you've been playing this character for a year, 2 years, and all of a sudden you might die, you all like sort of join together and protect each other to make sure that character doesn't die. Because if somebody walked onto the set of Friends and tried to kill Joey, like how stressed out would all the actors be, right? They and this is a situation where it's not scripted.
Now, so do you ever try, like, you ever have a conflict and with any of your podcast members in everyday life, and you're like, you hold the Dungeons and Dragons thing against them, like, oh, you're gonna get the last bag of Funyuns. Well, guess what? You better watch your character next game.
It takes a lot of restraint. I mean, we're all pretty easygoing people. We've known each other for a while, so most of that stuff, yeah, it kind of comes out in the wash, or it's happened a long time ago. But part of the reason I think why they haven't killed me already as a DM is that I try and be impartial as much as I can. I try and be chill about it. Yeah, just try and leave that stuff um, away from the table before you come to play.
Now, so the dungeon master, he's able to involve himself into the game.
There's a lot of debate about that. I like to be involved. It really depends. Like I'm playing everybody who isn't the main characters. So they, like you said, they talk to a shopkeeper, they talk to a guard, they talk to a blacksmith. I get to be all those people. So I already feel like I'm involved. The only thing that I don't get is I don't get to be surprised. I don't get to be surprised by the story because I'm the one who's kind of dictating what happens.
Yeah,
Now, I mean,
it's hard for you to get into the group too because if you create a character for the group that's running through all the dungeons and stories that you've created, it gives you more of a partial side to them.
for
Being
sure.
able to drop yourself off weapons and things while everyone else is getting fucking hammered over by goblins or something.
Yeah, and people have done it, and it usually messes up the group because people get jealous or they get. I mean, at that point, you're just living out your own power fantasy, right?
It's the fucking monopoly thing where everyone starts buying all the places and you get every time you land, you get screwed over.
Yeah, I told you it's not that different.
Fucking
And one
park the
thing I like about
place.
D&D, one thing I like D&D is that it's cooperative for the most part. You're not out to beat each other. You're usually on the same team. Sometimes there'll be one thing that one player wants and the other player wants it too, and they got to figure that out. But for the most part, it's them against me as the DM. So sometimes I'm like I'm not on their team, and that can be tough with a group of friends. And if something goes really bad, then they might take it personally and then get mad at me just sitting there rolling dice.
So crafting out stories that you do for these things, like we talk about, kind of knowing your friends and the types of stories and adaptations you can do based on how you know their personalities and things. What about like, do you randomly just have a day where you sit and start getting inspiration for a good story? Because I mean, I know, does your podcast like does it follow a storyline? Like it's all one continuous story. Each episode is just leaving off where you guys left off in that game.
Yeah. This that's kind of how we found that we enjoy the game. If it's one continuous story, it feels like the stakes get higher, you get more invested, there's more payoff. I know a lot of people just do what they call one shots, which are just like one sit down, one session. You sit down for 3, 4 hours, whatever, and you knock out a story and that's it, you go home. But we play one continuous story, and the way I plan them is at at work. I mean, I do, like I said, right now I'm working shipping and receiving. It gives me a lot of time. I work in a basement by myself. I listen to audio all day. I listen to other podcasts. I listen to audiobooks, and I listen back to the episodes we've done so that I know what I'm planning kind of makes sense, and I kind of check it against what's in my book. And maybe one person did something that completely rewrites the story for me, and then I've got to hash it out again. I'm lucky, and I've kind of like built my life in a way that I have that time to devote to telling a story that I'm really proud of. You know?
Now, through all your episodes, like even though it's just one long continuous campaign of this game, that game has to come to an end at some point, right? So your next episode, when it comes to that, would have to be on a whole nother campaign, and
Yeah, for
that
sure,
you could label that as another season as well.
for sure. We haven't really talked about what we want to do there. I mean, it's potentially a year or more away. And if we finish this story and we've done everything we want to do, then maybe we just call it there. But if people like it, if we're still into it, then we start a new story.
I think it's interesting, man, because like I said, there's a lot of things that people consider to be nerdy and consider to be kind of stupid or dumb. And it's like, this isn't one of them. Like for me, like I don't know a whole lot about Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm fascinated with so much of ancient culture. I'm a fan of World of Warcraft. I'm a fan of
Yeah, yeah.
any type of RPG games. And this is just a more interactive way of doing this. Honestly, this is better than World of Warcraft in a way. Yeah, World of Warcraft is a video game, so it makes it easy. Like you can shapeshift and do all this, but this relies so much on your creativity. I mean, the
Hmm.
amount of imagination that you have to be able to kind of get into the vibe, like literally feel like you're in the room. And I mean, I've never sat down. I see what my buddies are talking about, like trying to get into the game and stuff. And I've talked to a couple people from other Dungeons podcasts and stuff, and they always, try and create a story that's adapted to your friends, like you were saying. And I think
Hmm.
that's amazing that something like that's out there, because when you truly listen to your guys' podcast, or you just truly even listen into onto your banter, like it's just a bunch of friends relaxing and having fun. There's no difference in my mind than that and sitting at a bonfire and drinking a beer. There's
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what we do. The only thing that we cut out of our normal game that we don't do in the podcast is eating snacks because they sound terrible.
Oh yeah.
Um,
My one
but
podcast, I had my buddies eating Chick-fil-A in the fucking thing. I'm like, this is perfect.
oh
Not a
no,
sponsor, not a sponsor. And he's like, hey,
yeah,
did you starts pulling out freaking Chick-fil-A sauce? I'm like, bruh.
tell them to lean back.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, otherwise it really is just hanging out. You don't hear a lot of people go, "Oh, board games? Oh, that's nerdy. Monopoly? Oh, that's nerdy." But all of a sudden, because it's dice and people are writing stuff down and we're talking about elves and dwarves and stuff, a lot of people can be judgmental about that. I've never had the experience of it because like we're just so easygoing about it. We're open about it. It's becoming way more popular right now. The most high grossing Kickstarter of all time was a D&D campaign who wanted to make an animated series on the story that they'd put together, and they grossed like $8 million or something. Like it's just becoming more normal.
Now, do you find that with like how superheroes and all these types of things are becoming so popular in culture, do you think D&D is going to become more popular? Because I don't know how much you can enlighten me on this, but I know there's a giant kind of thing going on where a lot of people think of it as anti religion when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, more like
Hmm.
of a demonic thing because it involves these types of stuff. But I feel
Yeah.
like as a culture in our movies, we've involved demonic possession in a lot of it as well.
Well, I mean that was definitely big in the '80s. I know right after D&D started, it got a lot of bad PR, I guess. A lot of people thought, well, like these kids sitting in this basement reading out of this book that has monsters in it.
They're
That's
smoking the devil's lettuce, damn it.
yeah. Well, I mean, everybody was doing that at that time. It's just you just don't talk about it. But now I think people are smart enough. Hopefully, most people are smart enough to go. You know what? These people aren't trying to like summon the devil. They're not cutting themselves and creating signs on the ground, trying to like do any real magic. We're just talking about like Lord of the Rings. We're sitting around talking about Game of Thrones. Where a lot of people and D&D is kind of fantasy specific, but there are a lot of games you can be a superhero. You can be A guy who works in an office if you want to do that. You can play in the Star Wars universe. Like there are so many options. This is just a way for you to, instead of watching a story or reading a story, you get to be in the story and make the choices you want to make.
It seems like with every Dungeons and Dragons game or podcast, it seems like they all go on the medieval background to it. But you said you could do a Star Wars version as well.
Oh,
Can you?
100%.
So you can change it to anything you really want. Like if you wanted to do a natural daytime, like I wanted to create a character that resembled me or something. So
For sure.
I'd create like a 20-foot tall dude with jacked ass muscle. No, I'm just kidding. But I would
You'd
create.
have a hard time getting through doors, but otherwise, yeah, I don't see a problem
That's
with it.
why we don't, I stand outside the city. I don't get
Yeah,
inside.
yeah.
I'm not good enough. But I think that's pretty interesting because, like I said, most of the ones I've seen, most of the advertisements I've seen for Dungeons and Dragons is all back in the medieval area. It's never built in a new sci-fi area. Now, I know yours goes back kind of in the medieval times a little bit,
Mhm.
but have you thought about maybe creating another campaign for the more futuristic time and trying to go by that standard? Maybe like do a little bit of research on like some Star Trek or Star Wars to try and get some information or some new equipment to add in.
Oh, definitely. And there's thing is once you kind of, I've been playing this game for a while now, and once you understand that it's just kind of a framework, it's just a set of rules, you can put whatever you want on it. We play in the fantasy universe because more like medieval times, because that's what people like right now. And that's what we're enjoying right now. It's more popular, and as a podcast starting out, like we wanted to tell a story that people would get into. And so that's kind of where we went with it. But oh man, I spent so many hours planning like a sci-fi game, an apocalypse game. I'm getting together with some buddies. I just want to have a good time with them and give them a taste of D&D that they've never had before. And I'm planning a little Jedi adventure. I've been playing Fallen Order for like the last week, and it's gotten me psyched about it. And once you know how to play the game, once you know how to DM specifically, you can make any kind of game you want.
So
Um,
setting up the environment as well. Like, do you guys try and create an ambiance in the room when you guys are playing your games of D&D?
Yeah, usually. For the podcast, it's gotten a little different because we need to be able to see better. You need to have like good lighting. Everybody's got to have their mics set up. You can't sprawl as much. Everybody's got to be close, like close to their mics. But when you're playing D&D, normally we sit around on couches. If somebody's got a fireplace, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, you just kind of dim the lights a little, or you only turn on the ones you need. And the DM who taught me, the guy I learned from, was an improv comedian in Toronto named Julian Frid. He always had music going, and he would kind of DJ the music to what was happening in the game. That was always amazing, and it immediately takes you out of whatever room you're in and puts you in whatever room he wants you to be in. Like that's just it's that it sort of transfers you that quickly, that easily.
I remember one time I played Monopoly, and as a punishment, it was like whenever you landed in jail or someone got free parking, everyone else would have to eat a raw ghost pepper.
Ooh,
So we went to the
you just
store.
increase the stakes.
So we went to the store and got the actual cooking ghost peppers, like the ones you use for cooking, so not the edible ones. Like these are really.
Oh,
I think after 2 bites, everybody ended up going home like an hour later. I've
yeah.
never been in so much extreme pain in my entire life. I was like, it's not even that hot. And then like a minute later, I feel like it burning through my throat and everything. I felt it worked its way through my digestive system.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the
Yeah,
game
and you
only
get that
lasts.
kinda dangerous, like, kerplunk
It,
feeling when it hits your stomach.
Dude, the game only lasted 10 minutes, but I was in 7 hours of pain. I had to drive 12 miles to my house
Oh,
um
boy.
at in the middle of the night. And like my buddy's like, it wasn't hot. And then next thing I know, I see him like leaning back on the recliner. I'm like, dude, we're still playing. He's like, nope, no, we're not. And he just goes in the bathroom, comes back, he's drinking milk. And I'm like, I think I need to go home. Like, oh, dude, that whole night I felt like shit. And the next day it came out like shit too. But it was one of those things like we tried to make adaptations to make it more fun. And I found that was more
Yeah.
interesting. It kept you
That
more.
one's good. It could use some workshopping probably. It sounds like,
Oh yeah, it was
not a replay.
it was a spur of the moment thing for sure.
Yeah, no, but I think anything you can do to make the game more fun, right? It's meant to be adapted. It's meant to be changed. So as long as you guys are like, and maybe next time not ghost peppers,
Yeah,
but
something like jalapenos probably should have been an easy start.
yeah, there you go. Or a shot of hot sauce.
I've done that one too. We did that one the second time, which was I was surprised we even did it. It wasn't
Ah,
even the
see.
good Monopoly either. It was one with the credit cards and shit. And I was like, I don't even have one of these in my own life. And he's like,
Hey,
just do
at
it.
that point, it's not about the Monopoly that you're playing. It like you could have been playing the travel edition. It wouldn't have mattered. It's all about that hot sauce.
Yeah, fucking Ghost Pepper, man. He went to go hit the buttons, like it's $50, and he's like, I just deducted you 5,000. I was like, well, how do you fix it? He goes, I don't know, man. It just throws the card at me. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, that's when games start to fall apart. And I always had like I've got four brothers. Part of the reason why I think I got into games that are like cooperative, like we play Pandemic now and stuff. That's you're all on the same team. We never finished a game of Monopoly ever when I was a kid. It always fell apart. Somebody got into a fight. Somebody was taking too much money or whatever. And yeah, it just stressed me out looking at Monopoly now.
I got grounded over Monopoly.
Oh no.
I made my parents go broke as shit. My dad's like, okay, go to your room. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, you're gonna be an unfair sport about it. I was like, well, I'm just showing off I won. I mean, sorry, every time you pass go, that $200 goes into my pocket, not yours. Look,
Hey.
don't buy Park Place and Boulevard. That's all I gotta say. Now, with Dungeons and Dragons, though, like, do you find that you want to kind of further your research a lot of the time? Like, you spending a lot of free time at work too. You know, you have time to think, able to create stuff. Do you find like you would
Mhm.
research something like top dragons in history, or top medieval premises, or something that goes into kind of your guess next idea for what you're going to create in your next episode?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I got the opportunity to go to Ireland about a month ago, I guess. My buddy Ben, who I mentioned earlier, was getting married. And when we went there, we like saw a couple of castles, which was super cool. Never seen a castle before in my life, but I've been playing games with them for like the last 15 years. So stuff like that when I'm like, okay, I want to have a castle in this story. They're going to be coming up to this castle next week. How does a castle work? Like everybody knows it's got a wall and like there's a drawbridge maybe. But if I want it to be really good, really authentic, I'm looking up like best medieval defense systems and like
Also,
that.
is it going to have moss on it? Is it going to have
Exactly. You want to get some details.
Yeah, because I feel like that's what creates a better story too. Like, oh, you guys approach a castle. I'm already thinking like, is it what type of castle are we talking about? 18th century? Are we talking about 20th century castle? Like,
Yeah, see, there you go.
one of the ones that still have like a brand new flat screen TV inside of it? Or are we talking about, is there moss growing off the side of the building that possibly I can climb up or climb out if I have to get out of a situation?
Yeah, see, there you go. And every little detail that you give the players, A, they can picture it that much better. And B, maybe they can use it. Like maybe sometime during the story, they're like, oh man, I got to get up this castle wall. I got to get down this castle wall. I'm running away from the dragon. Oh, there was that moss there. I climbed down the moss. And it's really rewarding for them and for you to be able to put that moss in the story. And then all of a sudden, everybody agrees that it's there. Everybody can picture it. And you're in the same world for a minute, you know?
How hard is it for you, like, if you have to piss really bad during the middle of a game? Or do you guys just pause? Because I feel like when you get so captivated by this, it's hard to pause. Do you ever just throw in something just to make the game end faster? Like, shit, I'm trying to go to bed right now.
Yeah, you just throw in a little cliffhanger. Usually I just like use that like teacher voice, like to make sure everybody is paying attention. And then you get like real slow, real dramatic. And all of a sudden everything builds up and then bam, and we'll pick it up next week. You just sort of have to leave them dangling a little bit. And then you can run off while they're all talking about what just happened and take your piss in peace.
Take your piss in peace. I like that. I think it's amazing, dude. The fact that they found a board game that can literally capture so much imagery and so much creativity all at once to really spark I mean, honestly, this should be more popular than any type of video game or watching Netflix. I mean, you're practically making your own movie and being involved in it as well. I
Yeah,
mean,
you got it.
people want to talk about going to a bar, talk about doing these things. Who's to say that this isn't better than that? I mean, how many times do we as people experience, just playing video games? Yeah, it gives us that sense of connection, but it's nothing better than actually being in the room with your friends as well. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
I've talked to so many people that do podcasts on video games and all these types of things. And I'm like, now it's a way for you guys to stay connected as well, much like Dungeons and Dragons is a way for you guys to stay connected. I mean, the fact that now that you feel like you have an audience that needs to, like, the next episode to come out, you guys are required now to hang out with each other. And you guys find that when you do hang out with each other, it's that requirement that's not really needed because you guys love hanging out. It's a great hang.
Yeah, you look forward to it every week. And I tell you what, it's a lot cheaper than going out to the bar every week with your friends too. Because you just buy a case of beer instead of going out and getting, one at a time.
Someone's got to order Uber Eats or a pizza or something.
Yeah, you take turns. You make it work.
Who's getting the wings?
Yeah, everybody owes everybody a little bit of money. Nobody remembers exactly how much. I feel like that's a good way to do it with friends anyway.
Oh, you don't know how much to tip the pizza guy, but you know how much that sword cost in the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, I didn't record that part, so
Well, hey, man, I really want to ask you though, with your name Questfall, where did
yeah.
that come from?
Uh, so naming stuff is hard. When you're in the middle of a moment and like, say it makes sense, you're walking down a shady street, a bunch of trees. You go, oh, that's shady lane, whatever. Like that's easy to name. But we're trying to come up with just something that people would know. It's a fantasy D&D podcast right off the bet, or right off the whatever. As soon as they heard it, we wanted them to know that it was a D&D podcast and that it was fantasy, but that it's kind of a little serious. Like there's a lot of comedy D&D podcasts out there where they're amazing and they're super entertaining. I know the guys from College Humor do a D&D podcast that is fantastic, but we're not comedians. We laugh a lot of the time. We have a lot of fun, but there will be times during the story where we're crying too. So we wanted people to know that going in. And so Questfall just sounded a bit more dramatic, a bit more serious, and still give that kind of fantasy flavor we were looking for.
When we talk about acting and playing a character, do you guys find it hard to do that, or is it so much easier because of how involved and how kind of focused you guys get in with the game? It seems like if you're going to cry or something, if you're actually in the moment and actually really kind of into the game, it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Oh, definitely. And in my experience at least, I don't feel like I'm a good actor. I like doing voices because that's just something, it's a way for me to be there with a little distance, like sort of wearing a mask. You're getting to pretend to be this thing. And a lot of the time when you're pretending to be this character for long enough, you you can more easily emote and feel things. You get mad and you get like disappointed and you get like you go through the whole gamut of human emotions with this character in a way that you can't do with yourself. It's just a sort of, that level of distance allows you to get emotional. And yeah, I think for the most part, at least with my group of friends and my experience in my life, it's easier to cry if you're sitting there at the table, um, being this character, than if you're sitting around a table with your buddies.
Damn, it's just like Monopoly. If someone builds a hotel,
Yeah,
somebody's crying.
it's amazing how much like Monopoly it is.
All based on capitalism, but this is back in the day.
Yeah, for sure.
See, coming up with a name is pretty difficult. The first thing I would think of if I was going to do a podcast, I'd call it freaking Books and Bridges. Books
That's
and
not,
Bridges,
that's not the worst. I'd think of engineering or something if somebody said that, but it's not bad.
Books and
We were thinking
Bridges.
of a lot of like dice puns, like role playing puns, but all like a lot of the good ones are taken or just didn't sound like us. Like I was listening to one of your earlier episodes about the "Don't Take My Bugles" or whatever
Don't
like that.
touch my
Don't
bugle.
touch my bugles. Sorry, I apologize.
He
But
jumped off a fucking train.
yeah, like that. But that's a crazy story, and so it made sense for them. Like they were already calling their group that before they started the podcast, and so you want something that has that kind of meaning for you. You
I
know,
got to think of a podcast name.
you've already thought of a podcast name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, you already did the work, man. You're good.
I have it so many people like when you saw Out of the Blank, what did that mean to you? I kind of want to ask.
Well, to me, it meant like could be anything.
Thank
It's
you.
it's from sort of from left field in a way. Like this is just my impression, so I'm not trying to put anything on. But that it could be from anywhere, it could be anything, and yet it sort of fills that gap that you needed. That blank is sort of like this empty space, you know?
That's exactly why I did it, and I've had people give me a wide variety of answers, and none of them are wrong, but just what the original concept was just supposed to be out of nothing, like, kind of like out of space, like, it's
Yeah.
just so pulling it out of somewhere. Someone said it was like, "Is this a gun podcast, like a blank pistol?" I'm like, "Damn, I never thought that in a million years, but thank you for giving me that," but
Yeah, I appreciate your input.
yeah, I just find it inspiring the way people come across things, different names and stuff. I've always been a random guy, so no conversation with me ever goes the exact same with everyone.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I just think we have a lot to learn from each other, and we're all doing something, whether you want to consider it interesting or not. I mean, I remember when I messaged you guys were like, why us?" And I was like,
Yeah,
you're a person, you got a story. If you want to come on, let's just talk. It's just a conversation. I feel like, I've learned a little bit more about Dungeons and Dragons for sure. And I'm very happy that there's people out there like you guys that are still being able to connect and have fun too. Cause it seems like a lot of the times now people don't ever want to hang out anymore. People don't want to do anything based on the
for
basis
sure.
of that. Like life is just too damn difficult.
Well, it's too easy to just, like, disappear into yourself a little bit, to take your own time, and this is a way for us to, like, take our own time together, but also not be us the whole time, you get to pretend for a while.
I got the name for my Dungeons and Dragons
Uh-oh.
podcast.
Alright, what do you got?
Dices and Demons.
That's not bad. I like the alliteration. It's easy to remember. It's also D&D is
I
your initials.
I was gonna say dices and bitches, and then I switched bitches at the last minute.
That might be more PC, yeah. And you probably have to have an all girl cast,
Dices
which
and bitches.
yeah,
I don't
but
know.
they'd have to be okay with the name beforehand.
Dude, there's so much mythological madness that you could do. There you go.
Damn, mythological madness, nailed it. Yeah,
Label
write it
it.
down.
Put it on a
Somebody,
sticker. We're
somebody
gonna,
trademark that.
we're gonna own it like Honey Smacks. If
I
this
haven't heard that before, but I like it.
if this podcast ever gets one sponsor, it better be fucking Honey Smacks. I've talked about them so much where I literally suffered from salmonella poisoning because of them.
Wow, that's dedication. Now,
Dude,
did somebody tell you how much or how into honey I am? Because that's a theme in our campaign as well, in our story, in our podcast.
why are you a fan of honey?
Oh well, just because it's delicious, and I don't know if there's a better substance on the face of the earth.
I hate the actual honey by itself, but I really love Honey Smacks. I don't know what it is.
Oh,
I don't know why there was a salmonella outbreak with all the boxes like a year ago.
yeah.
I ate that box. I got sick every single bite. I knew it was from the box, but I paid $5 for it. And if I'm gonna die by Dig'em, it's gonna happen.
Hey, you saw it to the end. That's what counts, and you
That
made it.
that was the campaign I was on.
Yeah, isn't that's kind of an adventure all by itself?
It's called Bowling for Bowel Disease.
I
Man.
guess you got a strike.
I call it a spare. Well,
There you go.
thanks so much for being on the podcast, Adam.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
I want to give you here a minute at the end to kind of promote your guys' podcast and everything and tell people where they can find your awesome work.
Thank you very much. Well, our podcast is called Questfall. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify. We launch on Podbean. You can also find more information about us on questfall.ca.
And you want to take us out with a little bit of Dungeon Master ending? Huh? Huh?
Uh, well, I mean, if this were my story, what would be happening is, at the end of this, after this amazing conversation where we've both been enlightened, I learned something about the dangers of honey smacks, and you've learned something about the joys of D&D. Uh, I would say we both have our D12s ready to smack each other, but who will win? Well, you got to find out next week.